The first time Lieutenant Jack Red Callahan saw a Sherman tank, it was sitting in the Sicilian sun, green paint already faded to a dull olive, its turret turned sideways like it had fallen asleep on duty. A single fly buzzed around its antenna, the only thing that seemed to move in the heat. "This is what's supposed to beat Hitler?" Callahan asked no one in particular. The tank looked ordinary. No menace. No growl. Just a clumsy box on tracks. Private Eddie Klein, the radio operator, leaned against the hull and grinned. "At least it has a radio. My uncle fought in 18, they had pigeons." Callahan smirked, but the words stuck. Maybe that radio would be the only thing standing between his crew and a quick death. By the summer of 1943, the Sherman was already collecting nicknames, none of them flattering. British crews called it the Ronson, after the cigarette lighter, lights first time, every time. German soldiers called it Tommy Cooker. American tankers just called it the Coffin. It wasn't that the Sherman was useless, it was just built for a different war than the one they were fighting. The Army brass had designed it as a battle taxi, meant to haul men across Europe, not duel with enemy tanks. Trouble was, by 1943, enemy tanks were exactly what stood in the way. And those enemy tanks had names that made a man's stomach turn. Panzer IVs. Panthers. And worst of all, the Tiger I, 70 tons of German steel, armed with an 88mm gun that could punch through a Sherman from 3/4 of a mile away. Callahan had heard the rumors before landing in Sicily. "One Tiger can take out 10 Shermans," someone had whispered on the troop ship. Another man swore he saw a Tiger take 20 hits before it even stopped moving. Standing in front of his new ride, Callahan ran a hand over the dented armor. "Well, at least they gave us 5 of them," he muttered. Inside the tank, the heat was worse, like crawling into a bread oven. Sergeant Bill Anders, the loader, was sweating through his undershirt, muttering prayers under his breath as he polished his Lucky Street Christopher medal. "You think that medal's gonna stop an 88? Joked Corporal Henry Hank Morales, the gunner, whose sense of humor had a sharp edge. Anders shrugged. "Can't hurt." Klein, hunched over the radio set, tapped the mic. "We got chatter already. HQ says German armor's been spotted near Jella." Callahan sighed and climbed into the commander's seat. It smelled of grease and fear. The first time they met a Tiger, it was almost a slaughter. They were moving along a narrow road outside a Sicilian village, dust pluming behind them, when Klein's radio crackled to life. Tiger reported ahead. "Grid 42 by 16. Be advised." Callahan barely had time to shout before the first shell hit. The lead Sherman went up in flames, turret blown clean off, landing in an olive grove like some grim harvest. "Reverse! Reverse!" Callahan yelled. The engine howled as Morales swung the gun toward where the shot had come from, but it didn't matter. Their 75mm round bounced off the Tiger's front plate like a rock off a church bell. "They're not even looking at us," Morales said, voice trembling. Another Sherman exploded. Men bailed out, running for cover. Callahan's tank lurched backward until they were out of sight, heartbeats hammering in the confined space. For a long minute, no one spoke. Finally, Anders said softly, "Feels like we brought a knife to a gunfight." That night, Callahan sat on the hull of the tank, cigarette glowing in the dark. Klein sat next to him, fiddling with the radio. "You know," Klein said, "we might be driving junk, but at least we can talk to each other. Half those German tanks don't even have radios. They use flags." Callahan looked at the antenna rising from the tank's back deck, a thin, wiry thing, quivering in the night breeze. It looked fragile, almost laughable compared to the thick German armor they'd seen. And yet, when he thought about the ambush earlier, it wasn't the gun or the armor that had saved them. It was the voice on the radio, warning them just in time to get out alive. He stubbed out his cigarette. "Then maybe that's how we beat them," he said quietly. "We don't fight their fight. We fight ours." Morales popped his head out of the turret. "Fight ours? What's ours? Run faster." "Run smarter," Callahan corrected, climbing down. Anders grinned. "Great. So when they write the history books, we'll be the heroes of the great sprint across Europe." For the first time that day, the men laughed, the sharp, tired laughter of men who knew tomorrow they'd have to climb back inside the oven and try again. Before bedding down, Klein tuned the radio one last time. Through the static came distant voices. Other tankers, other crews, alive. He scribbled down notes in his logbook, recording the words as if they were prayers. Callahan lay awake a long while that night, listening to the faint hiss of static through the open hatch. It sounded like breathing. The tank was alive. Normandy was nothing like Sicily. Sicily had been dry, dusty, sun-baked. Normandy was a green maze of hedgerows, the fields stitched together by thick walls of earth and tangled roots that seemed almost designed to trap tanks. The first week after D-Day, Callahan's crew spent more time hacking through bocage with entrenching tools than fighting the enemy. But when the fighting came, it came with teeth. The first tiger they saw in France appeared just before dawn, its silhouette hulking at the far end of a misty field. For a moment it didn't look real, more like a church moving on its own. Then its 88 barked. The shells screamed past, slamming into the tank behind Callahan's and turning it into a torch. "Move!" Callahan yelled. Morales fired a round that bounced harmlessly off the tiger's glassy plate. Anders reloaded so fast he nearly jammed the breech. Another shot, another ricochet. The tiger turned its gun toward them, slow and certain, like a man lining up a pool shot. "Back! Back! Back!" Callahan shouted. The driver gunned it in reverse, the Sherman crashing through a hedgerow, snapping roots like bones. The tiger fired again, missed, but the concussion shook every man in the turret. They lived, barely. Later that night, in a barn they had commandeered as shelter, the men sat in silence, faces smeared with soot. No one wanted to say it, but it was written in every expression. They were outmatched. "It's a bad dream," Anders muttered finally. "A nightmare with treads." "It's not unbeatable," Callahan said, voice flat. "Just big. Big things fall hard." Klein was fiddling with the radio again, scribbling on his logbook. "HQ says we're getting more tanks. Jumbos, Fireflies, you name it. They think numbers will do it." "They better send a lot of numbers," Morales said darkly. 5 to kill one, isn't that what they say?" It was true. The numbers weren't on their side in single fights. A Sherman needed help, needed teamwork, to bring down a tiger. But that was where they had one advantage. Radios. If Sicily had been survival training, Normandy was where Callahan's crew learned to hunt. The next week, they tried something different. Instead of charging head-on, they split into 3 tanks, leapfrogging through the fields, one firing to distract while the others flanked. When they finally got the kill, no one believed it at first. The tiger had been sitting hull down on a ridge, picking off Shermans as if at target practice. Callahan gave the order. Morales put a round through the side armor at a range so close Anders said later he could smell the German fuel. The tiger belched black smoke, the crew bailing out before the ammunition cooked off. "Holy hell," Morales breathed, staring. We killed it." Callahan just nodded, but he could feel the blood pounding in his ears. "Someone tell the War Department," Morales said with a shaky laugh. "Turns out the pea shooter actually works." For the first time since landing, the crew felt something like hope. Not confidence, that would have been too much to ask, but the realization that they weren't completely helpless. Callahan started to see the radio not just as a tool but as a weapon. The chatter that once felt like background noise became music, positioning calls, target coordinates, warnings of ambushes ahead. The voices stitched the battlefield together into something they could navigate. At night, they listened to other crews' transmissions and learned from them. "Don't face them straight on," one voice said over the air. "Go for the tracks. Pin them first." Another voice told how they circled a panther, 3 Shermans dancing around it until one got the kill shot. It became a kind of orchestra, each tank its own instrument, the radio the conductor's baton. "Think of us like wolves," Callahan told his crew one morning. "We don't take the beast head-on. We harass it, tire it out, come from all sides. Wolves bring down things bigger than themselves every day." "That makes us wolves?" Anders asked, raising an eyebrow. Smelly wolves, Morales said, sniffing his grease-stained shirt. Even in the dark humor there was a spark of pride. They were learning. They weren't just meat inside a steel box anymore. The next encounter proved it. Near St. Lo, they caught another tiger on the move. Callahan positioned 2 Shermans to draw its fire while his own tank slipped around through a narrow lane. The first 2 took hits. One was knocked out, but the distraction worked. "Take the shot," Callahan said. Morales squeezed the trigger. The shell slammed into the tiger's thinner side armor, and this time the giant stopped moving. Flames licked out of the hatches. No one cheered. They just sat in silence, breathing hard, the smell of burning oil filling the tank. "Guess we're wolves now," Anders said softly. Klein's radio crackled, reporting more enemy armor ahead. Callahan stared at the glowing horizon. Each victory only brought another fight. But something had shifted. The Sherman was still a bad tank, still thin-skinned and undergunned. But with enough of them working together, talking together, it could become something far more dangerous than any single tiger. And now, they were beginning to believe it. By late July, the fighting in Normandy had turned into a grinding, claustrophobic nightmare. The hedgerows were no longer obstacles. They were traps. The Germans used them as ambush points, their tigers waiting like patient hunters. Callahan's crew had learned to smell danger before they saw it. The silence of birds before a kill zone, the faint track marks in damp soil, the sound of engines just out of sight. Operation Cobra began with the sky itself ripping open. Thousands of Allied bombers flattened entire sectors of the German line, leaving the ground shaking like a drum. Callahan's tank moved out with the rest, the earth still smoking under their tracks. The air reeked of burned cordite, charred hay, and something darker. They expected the enemy to be broken, but the tigers were still there. The first contact came at a crossroads near a cluster of stone farmhouses. Klein picked up radio chatter just seconds before the first shell tore through the lead tank in their column. It exploded so violently that parts of the turret landed 50 yards away. "They're dug in," Klein shouted. Callahan ordered the driver to gun forward, smashing through a low wall to take cover. Morales swung the turret, heart hammering. The tiger's gun barrel was just visible through the smoke, a black finger pointing death straight at them. "Fire!" The Sherman's round struck sparks off the tiger's front plate. No effect. "They're turning on us," Anders shouted. Another shell whistled past, slamming into a farmhouse and blowing it apart in a cloud of stone and fire. The tiger loomed through the smoke, its engine roaring like some mechanical beast. "Pull back," Callahan barked. The Sherman reversed into a ditch as the tiger fired again. The round went high, hissing past so close they could feel the heat of it. "Radio the others," Callahan snapped. "Tell them to swing around. Box it in." For the next 5 minutes, the battlefield turned into a deadly chess game. Callahan's tank darted from cover to cover, firing just enough to keep the tiger's gun pointed their way, while 2 other Shermans maneuvered through the hedgerows. "Left flank," Klein reported. "They're in position." "Hold him steady," Callahan ordered. Morales gritted his teeth, fired again, and watched the shell bounce, but it was enough. The tiger didn't see the flanking Shermans until too late. A roar echoed across the field as one of the flanking Shermans put a round through the tiger's thinner rear armor. Fire gout from the engine deck. For a moment, the tiger didn't move, like some wounded animal refusing to admit defeat. Then the hatches flew open and German crewmen scrambled out, running for cover. Inside Callahan's tank, no one spoke. Sweat ran down Morales' face. His hands trembled on the traverse handles. "That's one," Callahan said finally, his voice low. "Plenty more out there." That night, Callahan rode home. "They told us this tank was junk, Ma. But today, junk saved my life. We had to trap a tiger like hunters with a bear. One man distracts it, the others finish it. It's ugly work, but it's the only way." On the other side of the line, Oberleutnant Klaus von Richter, Tiger commander, sat in a barn scribbling in his diary. "The Americans are everywhere. They move like ghosts, whispering over the airwaves. One cannot fight an enemy who seems to be in 10 places at once. The next day brought an even closer call. At dawn, while pushing through another sector, Callahan's tank rounded a bend and found itself staring straight into the maw of another tiger less than 200 yards away. For a frozen heartbeat, both tanks stopped. "Traverse! Fast!" Callahan shouted. Morales cranked the turret with everything he had, Anders slamming around into the breach. The tiger fired first. The shell struck low, tearing the track clean off. The Sherman lurched sideways, crippled. "Get out!" Anders yelled. But Callahan didn't give the order. "Stay put," he barked. "Gunner, fire." The round hit the tiger's gun mantlet and deflected, but it bought a second. Another Sherman appeared behind the tiger, flanking perfectly, and its first shot turned the German tank into a roaring fireball. Inside Callahan's tank, the men sat in silence, breathing hard. Smoke seeped in through the open hatches, acrid and stinging. Anders broke the spell with a shaky laugh. "If we live through this war, I'm buying a German radio just to frame it." No one laughed, but the corner of Callahan's mouth twitched. The order came through that evening. They were to spearhead the next day's attack on a small village where German armor had been reported. Klein's radio crackled with the coordinates. "Looks like we're up front again," Morales said, leaning back. "Then we do it the same way," Callahan replied. "We run the wolves around the village. No tigers walk out." Outside, the night was still, but the air felt charged. Somewhere out there, more tigers waited, their engines rumbling like thunder on the horizon. The village lay crouched in the dawn mist, roofs black against the pale sky. Smoke still curled from the chimneys, though the civilians had long since fled or been driven out. Somewhere in the gray silence, German armor waited. Callahan's crew was quiet as they rolled forward. The tank rattled across broken cobblestones, every sound too loud, too sharp. Klein's voice came through the headset, clipped, focused. Intermittent chatter on the German net. "They know we're coming." "Good," Callahan said. "Let them know who's hunting who." The lead Sherman crossed the square first, and died in a flash of orange. The explosion rattled every rib in Callahan's chest. "Tiger's here," Morales shouted. "Find him." Callahan snapped. They swung down a narrow side street, plaster raining from the walls as the turret smashed through an overhang. Anders loaded fast, hands moving like a machine. "There!" Morales shouted. Through the haze he saw the tiger, blackened from past fights but still dangerous, its barrel turning toward them. Callahan didn't hesitate. "Driver, punch it!" The Sherman roared forward, closing the distance. The tiger fired first. The round slammed into the house just behind them, showering the tank in dust and brick. "Fire!" Callahan barked. Morales' shot hit low, shattering masonry at the tiger's feet. The German tank backed into cover, smoke puffing from its exhaust. "This is it," Callahan said, calm now. "Klein, call in the others. We pin him. We don't stop till he burns." What followed was a deadly dance through the village streets. Callahan's Sherman moved like a boxer, darting, jabbing, forcing the tiger to keep its gun swinging. Another Sherman circled from the far end of the village, cutting off its escape. Von Richter's crew fought like cornered predators. The tiger's coaxial MG stitched the walls near Callahan's driver, bullets hammering the armor. Another shot rang out, smashing through a church wall and sending its bell crashing into the street. Then came the moment Callahan had been waiting for. "Now!" he shouted. Morales fired. This time the round punched through the tiger's side armor. Fire blossomed from the engine deck, rolling black smoke into the sky. The German crew tried to bail, but another Sherman's round struck home, sealing their fate. The tiger burned hot, flames licking at the sky until the heat was unbearable. For a long moment, no one in Callahan's tank spoke. The village was silent except for the crackle of fire. "That's it," Anders said finally, his voice flat. "That's the last one." Callahan looked out through the periscope, watching the black smoke curl higher. Somewhere deep down, he felt no triumph, only exhaustion. "We hold here," he said quietly. "Make sure no one slips through." By midday, the fighting was over. The village was theirs. Sherman sat hulking in the square, their engines ticking as they cooled. Infantry moved through the houses, rooting out the last German stragglers. Callahan climbed out of the turret and stood on the hull, helmet under his arm. Morales joined him, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "You think that was Von Richter's crew?" Morales asked. "Had to be," Callahan said. He watched the Tiger's wreck burn. That one fought like it had something to prove. They stood there a while longer, saying nothing. The war wasn't over, but for them, the balance had shifted. The Tiger, the monster that had haunted every hedgerow and every road, was finally down. That night, Callahan wrote one last letter before sleep. "The tank's still ugly, Ma. But she carried us through hell today. I think we've learned how to fight. We're not just surviving anymore, we're winning." When dawn broke the next morning, the Shermans were lined up and ready to push east. The air still smelled of burned fuel and brick dust, but there was a sense of momentum now, of inevitability. As Callahan climbed back into the commander's hatch, he ran his hand along the scarred metal of the turret. "All right, girl," he muttered. "Let's finish this." The engine growled to life, loud and defiant. In the distance, beyond the smoking village, the road to Paris waited.